The man I'm about to introduce to you tonight is a public servant, a legislator. He's also a lawyer, and putting those two things together isn't very unusual. In a legislative body where laws are made, it's helpful to have a few lawyers. But the piece of our guest's biography that has become increasingly unusual is this line at the very end. Josh Kail and his wife Abby and their 7 children live in Beaver, Pennsylvania. That's right, 7 children. And as you'll see in a minute, he's not that old. We thought you'd enjoy meeting one of Pennsylvania's emerging leaders, someone whose commitment to his faith and his family are the defining marks of his life. You'll want to meet him. Stay with us. Robert F. Kennedy and his wife Ethel were famous parents to 11 children, 7 boys and 4 girls. Big families were once a staple of American life, but today couples have fewer children, or none at all, and they're having them later. A young, obviously pro-life state representative from southwestern Pennsylvania, Josh Kail and his wife Abby, apparently didn't get the memo. The young couple recently welcomed their 7th child, Evangelina, into their family, bringing their child total to 7. Those who know the family say they're a happy gang, not overly stressed despite having a travel and legislative schedule that rivals a touring country band. So how do they do it? How do they keep life in balance? How does he understand his calling to be a father and a public servant? Some of you might find a big family like Josh's a little weird or strange. Some of you may find it heroic. Maybe it's a little bit of both. We'll find out. Representative Josh Kail, welcome to State of Independence.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is great. I come from what I thought was a pretty big family. We had 6 kids in our family, and 3 boys, 3 girls, and I always thought that was a pretty big family. But 7, that's quite a bit.
Yeah, it's a lot. I'm used to it. I grew up in it. I'm one of 7 myself. I'm actually the 5th of 7, and so to me, it's pretty much the same. And I also think it's actually one of the reasons why I enjoy the legislature, because there's so many different personalities, there's so many things happening, there's so many different people you have to talk to get certain things done. It kind of reminds me of growing up, and it kind of reminds me being back at home, having all kinds of different mouths to feed and all that good stuff.
If you're 5th or 7th, you're kind of in the middle there, so you got to really work to be heard and seen, right?
And so as the 5th of 7th, in my family, I had 3 older brothers, and growing up, my family. And an older sister, then there was me. And my 3 older brothers were these big guys, and they're great athletes. All 3 of them went to Johns Hopkins, 6'2", 6'3", strong guys. And then there was me. They used to call me the football. I was kind of a late bloomer. I was short and chubby. And so I realized pretty young I was not going to be able to muscle my way to getting anything. Yeah. And so I had to find ways to...
Charm and finesse, right?
That's right. And one great example, actually, I just was talking to someone about this the other day, is if we wanted to order pizza, and I wanted a particular brand of pizza, I knew that my brothers wanted Pizza Hut and I wanted Domino's. In order to get my parents to order Domino's, I knew that I had to talk to my older sister, because she had veto power pretty much over all the boys, because that's who my dad would listen to. So you got to figure out, who you got to talk to get certain things done, and that's, kind of how it is in the legislature as well. So it helps being a father as well, obviously, too.
Yeah. Is there anybody else in the legislature that has as many kids as you?
So Representative Rossi had 8 children. One of them has passed away, and she has 7 now that are alive, and she has 7 children as well. They're older than my children. I'm not sure exactly how old the oldest one is, but just a couple years older, and we talk about it often, and we have a good time of understanding, because you're right. You mentioned in the opening, there's not too many people with that size of family anymore. It has become unique, in my estimation, unfortunately unique. So.
Yeah. So tell me about your heritage. I mean, you've got Kail apparently is not an unusual name in Aliquippa and in parts west. Tell the audience, that is, about your wonderful family.
So in southwestern Pennsylvania, there are lots of Kails. My grandmother had 60 grandchildren. She died in 1995. She had 12 children, and then 60 grandchildren now. and somewhere in the 90s of great-grandchildren. And she had 9 boys and 3 girls. So many of us still have this last name, Kail, and many of us still live in Western Pennsylvania. I have a cousin that sits on city council, Teresa Kail Smith, and cousins that are doctors and played baseball and athletics all over different parts of the South Hills of Pennsylvania, South Hills of Pittsburgh, and Western Pennsylvania. So yeah, there's a lot of us, and growing up, there was like waves of cousins. You know, there was like the first wave, and then there was the second wave that I was in, and then there's like basically 2 more waves after me as well. And so I just remember having Christmas Day. Our family would get together, and we'd go to my mother's family, who was not nearly as big. In fact, I have 1 cousin on my mother's side. I have 54 or 53 on my father's side, and we used to go there and have a great time with my Yaya and Papa and my Aunt Mary and my Aunt Sophie and so on and so forth. And then in the evening, one of my dad's siblings would decide to have just dessert at their house, and it was awesome.
Would it be like a Lebanese dessert? I mean, your family is of Lebanese extraction.
Yeah, there would certainly be Lebanese desserts. My aunts are phenomenal at making certain cakes and different carrot cake. For some reason, we all love carrot cake a lot too. But it wasn't so much the desserts. It was just I call beautiful chaos of being around that many people at that age. And it wasn't like we had estates or things like that. It was relatively, what we consider smaller homes, and we didn't even think of it. We just loved being around our family. We loved that time of year, and it was just great to see your cousins and your uncles, and you come to learn that that's where expectations for what it is to be a Kail and what it is to be a human really were made in those types of settings, and that was how I grew up. So
yeah, that's wonderful. Abby is also from Western PA?
Yeah, Abby's from Armstrong County.
Yeah,
Armstrong County, Katanning, Worthington actually is the technical town. I met her at Geneva College. She was a cheerleader, and I was a football player. Kind of cliche.
There you go. There you go. Well, that's great. So you end up being like your bigger brothers. You grew into it, and
I was a late bloomer. I never got to be as tall. I still call myself the run of the family because you never quite get that chip off your shoulder when you're the 5th and you have 3 older brothers. But I ended up playing football at Geneva, and right after Geneva, Abby actually graduated in 3 years. She was the year behind me, and I graduated in 4.
Did you guys get married right after college?
Yeah. That summer. Actually, I think I got married June 7th of 2008. I graduated the end of May in 2008, so it was within a couple of weeks. So, yeah. Yep.
And so what made you go to law school?
I had a professor who was instrumental in my life in college, and I changed pretty significantly in college. I kind of came into college not having much ambition as far as what I wanted to do with my career. I thought I was just going to end up working with my dad in his business. And so I met my wife my sophomore year, and things started to get a little more serious. And I was a political science major. And I had a political science professor who told me, he said, "Josh, it looks like you're starting to get serious." At the time, I think I had just gotten engaged. And he's like, "You're getting serious in life. Like, you're not going to be able to, have a job and support a family with a political science degree. You probably should go to law school." And that was really the first time I ever thought about going to law school. Like, I never had an ambition to go to law school. So I thought about it, and he introduced me to a professor from Regent University, Professor Jacobs, who's a wonderful guy. He has Western Pennsylvania connections as well. And
Regent is a Christian school?
Yes, Christian school in Virginia Beach. And he told me this is where you should apply. And so I did. And that was the only school I applied to. I got in, and I went to Regent University for law school. So.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Now, were you already a Christian when you got to college, or did you have was there some point during your college career you became serious about your faith?
I think there is. I think there was certainly I grew up in a home where Christianity was foundational. My parents were both Christians, and they stressed that upon us. And they really, you could tell that, I'd say about my father and my mother, but they're just very authentic people. Yeah. And they were like that with us, and they told us this is, how you should go and what the church, and they were very serious about their faith, and faith was the foundational portion of my upbringing. But still, it got to become your own at some point, right? And so in college, I had a good friend. We had a very close group of friends in high school. And in college, one of them ended up with cancer and ended up passing away. And that situation and I tell people that if I were to write a book on my life, that would be the end of the chapter on my childhood, was that situation. It really kind of made us just start thinking bigger picture. It's just not a kid's world anymore, and you start thinking about, what's going on. I always remember my dad's words, the sooner you figure out that life isn't a playground, that it's a battlefield, the better off you'll be. And that's when I started figuring that out. And about the same time, I met my wife, and that's really changed the projection of my life. Yeah. If I would have never met my wife, I'd still be dragging my knuckles. I promise you.
I feel the same way. My wife had the same impact on me. I actually, very similar, met my wife when I was a sophomore, she was a freshman, and we got married right after I graduated, and she graduated in 3 years, like your wife did. The only difference is we only had 3 kids, and you're more than double me, man. You're twice the man I am, and then some.
I tell people all the time that it doesn't really change much after 3. I mean, the dispensations grow, right? Yeah. Like, I've been in diapers for 10 years. I've had a kid in diapers, not me personally. But I've had a kid in diapers for the last 10 years. And I'll have one once we get to high school for 10 years, whatever it is. But, once you hit 3, it's zone defense. Yeah. And then, you get 4, turns into nickel, 5, 6, you're in dime. Now I'm just like, no big plays, prevent defense. Right. Don't let anyone behind you. So it's a lot. It's a lot of energy gets expended on it, and there's nothing like it. And I wouldn't trade it for anything else.
So tell me, so you got this. When did you get elected?
2018.
All right, so 2018 you got elected to the State House.
Yes.
And so now you have the responsibility of being a legislator, and the world is looking at you, of course, because you're an elected official. Mm-hmm. So how does that impact, being a family man, a father of 7, a husband, that busy life, which has its own challenges, and now you're representing a whole district of people.
Yeah, and it certainly is a challenge. And when I was a lawyer, I was very busy. When I was practicing full time, I still do a little bit, but not nearly like I was. You weren't home that much, but you're at home every night.
Right.
And that means something, right? And now it's a little bit different. You're not quite at home every night. And I think, in one extent, it is an advantage because I have a why right in front of me. Like, why am I doing this?
Right.
And I go home, and that's why I'm doing this, for my kids and for their generation. And I hope one day that my kids, when they get to a point where they're older and have a little better understanding of what's happening, they can look back and say, you know what, our dad wasn't at every event. He was there, but he wasn't at every event, and he wasn't at every function, but he was out there making the world a better place for us. And he was out there making a better world for our peers. And I hope they'll have an appreciation for that, because that's what I'm trying to accomplish. And that's what my thought is on the whole thing. If I'm going to be out here, I'm not just going to be out here just to have the prestige of being a state representative or feeling good about it. I want to be here so that I can have a positive impact, so that one day my kids and their generation can look back and say, we made this Commonwealth a better place. And so that's what we're working towards. And hopefully it makes sense.
It's a tall order. I mean, this is heady stuff. On the one hand, you're a big shot. I mean, people aspire to be elected officials, and here it is now. You're a state rep. And you go to Harrisburg. Then the people at home don't get to see it, but you go to Harrisburg. You go to the State House with this marvelous building, with all this history, and you're one of a chosen few, chosen to represent your people in the legislature. And so how do you, how do you keep your focus as a Christian guy? I mean, you're a guy who has made it known to people that you follow Christ. You're a Christian guy, and that's how you're centered. And so you come to the legislature, which is a tough political place where there are lots of divisions clearly along political lines. I mean, Democrats are on one side, Republicans are on the other, and for some people on the outside, it looks like maybe the two don't ever meet or talk. Sure. So as a Christian, Jesus said to all of us, you are the light of the world. The city set on the hill can't be hid. So what's it like for you? How do you show that you're the light of the world in the legislature? I mean, in that environment?
I think in today's environment, I think the most critical characteristic of Christianity that we really need to show well is humility. And I think it's foundational to being a Christian. Coming to Christ and saying I am a sinner, like I have problems, right? It takes a dose of humility. You can't not have that. Right. And I think we're lacking humility in lots of ways in our political realm. And I think that's an important aspect of this, is staying humble. And I have a distinct advantage at doing that. And the advantage I have is I go home and change diapers, and I get kicked by a 2-year-old in the middle of the night. And it's just, and when you grow up as the fifth of 7 with 3 older brothers, it's hard to, you say you're a big shot, but, you go back
home.
You're
still my little brother, buddy.
Right. No one's really a big shot in that setting. Yeah. So I think that's the key to it at this, this framework in time, at this point in time. Is to show humility and hear people and hear what people have to say. And I think that's just so important in today's political environment, is to have that dose of humility.
Yeah. Is there any opportunity at all to talk to people on the other side of the aisle?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Harrisburg is a little bit different than DC, right? Mm-hmm. I call DC poor man's Hollywood, right? It's just that people go there and they get clicks when they go on MSNBC or Fox News, right. And the more ridiculous thing you say, the more clicks you get, and so it turns into this just bomb throwing session. In Harrisburg, it's not quite like that, although Facebook and social media is turning it into a little bit more like that. But there's, I try and have bipartisan dinners at least once a month with people, whether it's in Western Pennsylvania or if it's in Harrisburg, just to hear and understand where people are coming from. I think the perspective that everybody needs to understand is we can disagree on ideology and on positions, right? But it's important, at least for me, to understand that these individuals are representatives just like me. And for most of them, maybe not all of them, but for most of them, their values are the values of their district. Right. So you try and understand why it's like that, and how you can find common ground, and how you can work on issues that are bringing opportunity to everybody and making the Commonwealth a better place.
Your district is probably more urban?
Oh, my district's actually very rural. It's west of Pittsburgh, and in between Pittsburgh and West Virginia. Right.
So I've been to Beaver County. I've been to Aliquippa.
Oh yeah,
so it's a great town. A lot of great football players.
There's a lot of great football players there, and that part, Aliquippa is an urban area, but that's right outside where I'm at.
But a lot of rural.
Yeah. It's suburban and some rural parts, and it's a great spot. It's a wonderful place to raise a family. It's a place where people care about each other, and they care a lot about their family and their history in that place. You mentioned Aliquippa, all the football players. We could talk. I could start rattling them off. My uncle coached for Aliquippa, so he was the head coach there, Frank Morocco. But it's a great place. Beaver County and Washington County as well. A little bit of that is too. So it's good.
Is there anything you're reading now? I mean, what's the, if there, or watching? Is there something that you think would be good for people to read what you've read or to watch what you've watched? Yeah,
right now I'm actually reading a very interesting book. It's more philosophical, and I usually read biographies and listen to biographies, but it's The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. Just a fascinating book, just an observation of where we are and how we got here, and why we're here. So that's where I'm at now. And I also wanted to make sure I said hello to my friend Sheila, who said she loves your show. And
really?
I told her I'd try and give her a plug if I had the chance.
Tell Sheila I said thank you.
I will. I'll call her on the way home.
That's great. Okay. Well, thanks so much, Representative Josh Kail.
Absolutely.
Good. We've been talking to Representative Josh Kail, one of the rising stars in the State House. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
So now let's talk to our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
Well, I think this is going to be one of my favorite conversations. Great stuff. I think one of the things that, when Josh is talking about big families, it does raise a question about what are we generations now fearing about large families. Is it economic insecurity? Is it we're just being selfish? Is it that we can't imagine how you could do everything that you want to do in life, pursue careers, degrees, and still have families? And it's the big puzzling question, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I love the sense of sacrifice and how self-effacing Josh was in the interview. I love the way he talks about his kids and the joy that they bring him. And that's more than money can buy. All the money in the world can't buy that. He talks about his kids and about their character. We were talking off camera, and he was just going through the kids and talking about child number 2 and 4 and child number 5 and the newest baby and the joys of raising kids. And you know something about this.
Oh,
I mean, you've got a
well. I didn't, Rebecca and I don't think we would have ever said that if you would have told us that we would have 4 children, that would have ever been a part of our story. It's kind of thinking maybe a baby or 2. Right. I mean, you would have looked at us in college days, not kid people.
Right,
those aren't, but what I think we have learned, and what people with big families have learned, is that when it comes to parenting, it really does change you completely. It makes you from a pretty self-centered person.
Right.
Every child makes you, I think,
less
selfish.
self-centered. Right, exactly.
Or, in some sad cases, it makes parents say, I can't do this anymore, and they run in the other direction.
Right.
But that's a big challenge, and I hope there would be more families that decide to enter public life and bring the whole circus in. Bring the whole family in, because it is helpful to see families who love each other. The Kennedys, the Bushes, others, you think of them as dynasties.
Right.
And then when they have problems in public, think, well, we would never have let that out. But it really, I think, is helpful when politicians are transparent.
Well, in those families, they admired the people who held elected office so much that a lot of them themselves decided to serve that way. And I like it that Josh is, he talks about humility and says that how important it is to have that as a part of your character. And then he says, and being a parent keeps you humble because a 2-year-old, a baby that needs to be changed, doesn't know what your office is and is not impressed. All they know is that they need to be changed. That diaper needs to be changed and needs to be changed right away. And that's just wonderful. I just love that sense of being humble, of having humility, that kind of love for other people. I think that's just so important, and it's a great thing to have if you're an elected official.
But it isn't something that you buy off the shelf.
Right.
You make a decision. You know that it is good to be a humble person, but you really don't know the path that makes you humble. And when you are relying on God to give you those attributes, He gives you exactly what you need to make you humble. The other piece I think that was striking to me is that this conversation was a really open and honest conversation about the role that faith plays. You do have politicians that kind of at the beginning of a campaign just say, look, I'm a member of this church, I'm in this club, this is kind of my thing, my identity, and that's just part of the bio.
Right.
But it's helpful and instructive, I think, to know where public officials draw their strength from. Where does their worldview come? How do, if you say, well, I'm just a person that treats everybody with respect, where does that come from?
Right.
That has to come from somewhere. And in Josh's case, saying that, well, it's because I believe that people are made in God's image, so that's why I respect them, not because they were a big contributor, a check writer.
Well, it's helpful for all of us to see faith in action, what it means to follow Christ in action, especially in a difficult place like the legislature, where you've got this big division between political parties and ideologies, and yet, so you're tasked with being a Christian, with loving your neighbor like you love yourself. And so, Josh and others like him are really kind of the embodiment of that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of neat to see that.
Here's one thing I was thinking of as you were saying that, and Josh talked about social media at the end, how that is changing the pressure. Social media is almost like the audience in the Coliseum.
Yeah.
And they want to see a cage match. They want to see people fight and blood fly and people get decapitated. And they want to see that because it's good sport.
Yeah.
It's why people watch hockey. You want to see someone get hurt.
Yeah.
And in politics, when you're yelling at the TV or you are posting on social media, you're trying to egg your guy on. And when he decides he's not going to play for that team and he's going to act like a statesman and a gentleman, suddenly you look up in the stands and there are not too many people cheering for you.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an interesting point that he made.
Yeah. It's great to be bigger than just the cheering, to be in it for the right reason. You're there to serve for a season as long as God would have you there, and of course the voters would have you there.
Yeah.
And you're not there to necessarily to hear them cheer back for what you do. People may not always appreciate what you do. You may make the right decision and it may be not appreciated, unappreciated at the time you make it, and you might even be voted out of office because of it. But after the fact, think of all the presidents that we know that when they left office were at their, had low approval ratings, but then after the fact, people said, "Wow, what a statesman that person was." Harry Truman, Jimmy Carter, people who maybe at the end of their presidencies were not highly, held in high esteem and had low approval ratings, but then as their life came to an end, people said, "Wow, what an incredible human being that was." What a Christian person. I just loved the way they thought through the decisions that they made, and they made the right decision in a number of instances, but they were people of character and of faith. And so it's hard. It's very hard.
Well, I think about what you said about President Carter and President Truman. Both of these gentlemen were interesting because they both were steeped in the Bible. They read the Bible. And what I hear people say is this: well, I liked him as in their post-presidency, but I didn't like them as president. And what people are doing when they say that is they're separating person from character. And I think we have to have people who are the same and produce decisions that we could admire, but ultimately we say we like them because of who they are.
Exactly. It can be difficult at times to view public officials as anything more than their party affiliation or the decisions they make, good or bad. But what I hope is today's inside portrait on the family and spiritual life of a leader, I hope it was encouraging to you. I think the more we know about public servants, the more we recognize our need to follow that ancient admonition to pray for those in authority. So maybe for you and for me, that means a little less criticism and a lot more encouragement and prayer for people in power. That's all the time we have today for today's State of Independence. Remember, you can find this episode and all past episodes at joewatkins.org. They're all posted in full on our YouTube channel. Be a subscriber and don't miss an episode. If you have a minute, send me a line. Let me know that you've been enjoying this program. Use the comment box at joewatkins.org to reach me. I read and reply to each one of them. Thanks to our special guest, Representative Josh Kail. We wish him a safe trip back to southwestern Pennsylvania and his big, beautiful family. I know it was a sacrifice. From America's first capital, Philadelphia, I'm Joe Watkins. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week.
Joe Watkins' State of Independence is a production of Lighthouse TV, positively different. Made possible in part because of the support of viewers like you.